With a gunshot, a reindeer with unusual antlers fell to the ground, dazed. Stephen, a hunter and gourmet, had come to the Brooks Range in northern Alaska with his friend Tim to seek reindeer. The area was riddled with winding rivers and vast lakes, home to various wildlife. The two quickly spotted a herd and a buck among them, weighing up to 300 pounds. Unfortunately, local laws prohibited hunting on the day of arrival, so they had to wait until the next day. To get food, the pair decided to go fishing. They observed the river and chose a spot with calm water to start fishing. Stephen, skilled in fishing, soon caught a fish. The wild fish fought hard but was eventually pulled ashore. It was a grayling, tender, and highly favored locally. Stephen taught Tim how to fish, and after several attempts, Tim also caught a grayling. Now, they rested. The next day at dawn, the hunt began, and luck was on their side with a visible migrating herd. They prepared to wait at an open grassland, where the reindeer would stop to graze. Hidden in the bushes, a pair of large antlers appeared first, belonging to an adult male reindeer. Stephen admired its proud posture. Tim aimed, waiting as the reindeer moved. Soon, an opportunity arose when the reindeer stopped. Quickly, Tim pulled the trigger. The reindeer attempted to escape when shot, but fell as the bullet hit a vital spot. After ensuring there were no issues, the two approached to inspect the reindeer. They marveled at its large antlers and decided to process it on the spot. They opened its belly, removed the organs to prevent spoilage, and cut the meat into pieces to pack and take with them. The hunt had gone unexpectedly well, but they were not leaving yet as daylight was fading. They prepared dinner, first frying the two fish and making a mixed vegetable dish as a side to enhance the flavor. The meal was enjoyed amid laughter, and the two cleaned up the fish before sleeping. After dawn, they set off again in search of reindeer, but unfortunately, the migrating herd seemed to have left the area. They saw no reindeer and decided to check the area where two lakes met. Luckily, a few stray reindeer appeared there. However, before they could act, a call came from the camp. A photographer had signaled the presence of a grizzly bear, likely attracted by the scent of reindeer blood. The bear seemed eager, but noises from the camp deterred it. After hesitating, it left the area. With no more concerns, they resumed hunting mode, creeping forward and getting as close as possible to their target. A robust reindeer entered their view. Stephen readied his rifle and patiently waited. When the reindeer stopped, Stephen quickly fired, and the animal fell after a few steps. They quickly butchered it and took it back to camp. However, the grizzly bear returned, seemingly not ready to give up. Facing this threat, both men took up their rifles and approached the bear. Stephen shouted loudly, trying to scare it off. But the bear was not deterred. Stephen fired a shot into the sky, then aimed at the bear, which finally fled in panic. Despite its embarrassed retreat, it gave them a furious look before running off. The next part was what they most looked forward to. They fried the venison in a pot, then took out some carrots, sweet potatoes, and chilies. After chopping these, they added them to the pot with the broth and some thyme for flavor. After some time, lifting the lid released a tempting aroma. They eagerly began to taste it, finding the flavor truly satisfying and praiseworthy. The man named Stephen is a full-time hunter. Today, he arrived in the Talk River area of the Alaska Range to search for the elusive Dall sheep. He teamed up with his friend Paul for this expedition. The region is known for its rolling high mountains, which, due to their rugged terrain, have become a no-go zone for most human activities. However, it also attracts a large number of hunters, with 2,500 people competing annually for a hunting permit. Some unlucky hunters have applied for 40 years without success, but Stephen was fortunate to get a permit on his fifth attempt. Local regulations require non-residents to hunt with a registered guide or a local relative. Fortunately, Stephen's brother Danny, an ecologist who is also keen on hunting, fulfilled this requirement. Thus, the hunting trip was a trio affair. Upon arrival, they studied the map and decided on their route, set up a simple tent, and began scouting the area. They hadn't spotted any sheep yet but encountered a black bear and, not far from it, a grizzly bear, confirming the wilderness of the area where dangerous beasts roam freely. Although the official hunting season was 2 days away, the real work would start the next morning. The next day, they planned to split up to increase the chances of spotting the sheep. Before setting off, they hung their supplies in trees to keep them out of reach of bears. Stephen and Danny went together, while Paul went solo. A curious marmot watched them as they tackled the steep mountain paths, which greatly sapped their energy. After much effort, they reached the top of the ridge, right on schedule with Paul's planned timing. Using binoculars, they spotted Paul on the opposite peak. He signaled that there were sheep directly above them. With 15 hours left until the start of the hunting season, they settled midway up the mountain. The next day, as the hunting season officially began, Stephen and Danny started climbing. Unfortunately, thick fog covered the mountaintop, severely limiting visibility. To avoid startling the sheep, they hid behind a recess in the rocks, waiting for the weather to improve. Hours later, the thick fog finally cleared, and the two men resumed their journey towards the mountaintop. Upon arrival, they spotted 2 sheep, luckily unnoticed by them. According to the law, they could only hunt rams with fully curled horns, a sign of rams over 8 years old. Stephen carefully examined one and felt it met the criteria, but he wasn't 100% sure until they got closer. Their position was precarious, and any sudden movement could alert the sheep. So, one watched while the other slowly crawled forward. After some effort, they successfully left the open area and moved out of the sheep's sight, quickening their pace while the sheep continued to play. Things were going smoothly. As Stephen was about to reach his spot, the sheep started to move. To get a better view, he decided to climb to the top of the ridge. Using his binoculars, he observed the moving sheep and soon had a clear view of the right horn, which was fully curled, meeting the hunting criteria. Stephen readied his rifle, waiting for the sheep to turn. The opportunity came quickly. The sheep stood sideways on a rock. Stephen pulled the trigger, and the sheep fell and began to roll down. Stephen tensed, knowing if it fell off the cliff, it would be hard to retrieve. He watched intently until the sheep stopped rolling. Relieved, he approached the sheep, now able to appreciate its majesty up close. It had thick, powerful horns, and touching them, Stephen felt awe for this king-like creature, expressing his admiration loudly. Paul arrived late from the other side. Together, the 3 men dragged the sheep to a flat area and began butchering it. With their combined efforts, they separated high-quality meat, which they packed by different cuts. Each then packed a backpack and left the area. Next came their most anticipated part. Fresh ingredients often require only simple cooking methods. Stephen sprinkled some seasoning on the sheep meat and pan-fried it. He then prepared some flour and baked several cream biscuits. After the preparation, the delicious food was ready. The biscuits paired with the sheep meat offered a unique flavor. The meat was neither tough nor dry, chewed just right. They relished their meal, celebrating a very successful hunt. Stephen, a full-time hunter, came to Mexico's Madre Mountains to hunt turkeys, one of the driest and most desolate places on Earth. This region is home to the Gould's wild turkey, the world's rarest and longest-legged turkey species, thriving here for thousands of years. It was Stephen's first time hunting Gould's turkey, and he was accompanied by his friend Jay, whose family had farmed here for 200 years. Jay, also an avid hunter, had prepared turkey decoys for the hunt. After checking their supplies, they set off on their ATVs across the rugged terrain and soon arrived at their destination. By 4 p.m., they needed to find a place to stay overnight and would consider hunting the next day. They spotted fresh turkey tracks along the way, indicating they were in the turkey's range. Jay used a tool to mimic the call of a hen. Soon, a turkey appeared, but quickly fled upon, realizing it was deceived. The men climbed higher to survey the terrain. They spotted 3 turkeys playing, but did not disturb them, opting instead to observe where they might roost overnight. By evening, the turkeys flew up to roost in a sycamore tree, giving the hunters a plan for the next day. At dawn, they positioned themselves with rocks as cover, waiting for the first crow of the morning. As the sun rose, turkey calls increased. They set up the fake turkeys and used strings to make them move realistically while continuing to mimic turkey calls. Their efforts paid off when a turkey hurried over, fanning its tail feathers to impress what it thought was a hen, oblivious to the hidden hunters. Before it could enjoy its display, a bullet struck it, and it flapped a few times before dying. The poor king of beauty ended its life in such a manner and even twitched, prompting Stephen to secure it with a stone. Back at the farm, Stephen hung the turkey to pluck its feathers and laid it out on a dish. Knowing that seasoning was key to delicious turkey meat, he prepared salt, sugar, and cut a lemon to squeeze into a pot. He also prepared garlic and submerged the turkey in the liquid to marinate for a day, anticipating a flavorful meal. At 3 a.m. the next day, the two men got up early and ventured back into the wilderness to hunt another turkey. After waiting for a while, another eager turkey rushed towards them. Its hurried running indicated its urgency, spurred by the presence of another competitor. Stephen remained calm and watched the performance until a plump turkey stood next to the decoy. He then pulled the trigger, and the turkey fell, becoming another casualty on the path of love. The two approached to examine their catch, and seeing its full form, Stephen was thrilled. He couldn't help but mimic the turkey dance in celebration. After their playful moment, they grabbed the turkey and started their return journey. Stephen went to a local charcoal processing plant and took a sack of charcoal, looking forward to the next part of his adventure. After a day of marinating, the turkey was well seasoned. Stephen spread the turkey on a wire rack above the charcoal, added some chili, and made sure to turn it frequently to prevent burning. Through his careful handling, a delicious grilled meal was ready. Jay tore off a piece to taste. It was crispy on the outside and tender inside, with a distinct flavor. Stephen also indulged in the meal, savoring the success of their hunt. It was a memorable day he would cherish. Stephen, a full-time hunter, arrived in southwestern Montana today with a friend to hunt grouse. Ronnie, a professional bird hunter, had trained several hunting dogs, invaluable assistants in their pursuit. Each man led a dog into the wilderness. The grouse were active in the mountainous areas, and it took the duo half a day to get themselves lost. After consulting the map, they realized they were only a mile off course. Both found it amusing and asked the photographer to cut that part out. They continued on, overcoming various challenges until they reached the top of the ridge. The men needed a break, but the dogs were just warming up, bursting with energy, and starting to search for their quarry. Inspired by the dogs' efforts, the men got into work mode. Soon gunshots echoed in the wilderness. Ronnie fired twice, and shortly after, a dog brought over the first grouse of the day. Ronnie couldn't help showing off to Stephen, who was visibly envious. Determined to outdo Ronnie, Stephen felt the competitive spirit typical among men. However, the dense forest made spotting grouse no easy task. After wandering for a bit, Stephen finally took a shot when he glimpsed a grouse, immediately pulling the trigger. Inspired, he fired 3 more times but missed each shot, roaring in frustration. This amusing spectacle made Ronnie chuckle. Meanwhile, 2 curious grouse were in. Ronnie approached slowly, startling the birds into flight, just as he wanted. His shooting was impressive, hitting every target, earning him Stephen's first compliment of the day. Laughter and cheers filled the wilderness, heightening their excitement. Unfortunately, a sudden rain dampened their spirits, forcing them to end the hunt early. But the spring shower was brief, stopping before they even descended the mountain. They chose to clean the grouse by the creek, removing the innards since the dogs wouldn't eat them. Afterward, they washed their hands in the creek, took the grouse, and continued on their way. After some time, they reached their truck, loaded the dogs into cages, and started their return journey. Today's hunt hadn't been as fulfilling as they'd hoped, so they decided to try again tomorrow. At dawn, they arrived on the mountain and began the hunt for grouse with their dogs. Soon, they spotted one. Stephen silently raised his gun while the dog, on cue, dashed out, startling the grouse into flight. Ronnie fired first, followed by Stephen. Quickly, the dog retrieved a grouse from the bushes. The day started off smoothly. The two continued on, treating the hunt as a leisurely stroll, taking things as they came and randomly picking their targets. A grouse flew past rapidly, evading capture, likely startled by the dog ahead of time. They ventured farther and higher than the previous day, but unfortunately, today's yield was meager. By noon, the dogs were exhausted, so they decided to head home. The grouse from the last 2 days took a fine dinner. By the river, they began processing the grouse. The method was simple. They stood on the wings, pulled the legs, and forcefully yet slowly split the grouse in 2, discarding everything but the legs. The breast meat, pink and tender, was cleaned thoroughly. Then, Stephen heated oil in a pan, prepared some chili, wrapped half a chili in 2 pieces of grouse meat, and deep-fried it, enjoying the sizzling sound. The legs were fried directly until brown, then cream was added. Stephen also cooked a pot of pasta, creating a 3-course meal that looked and smelled delicious. Ronnie couldn't help but exclaim in amazement and was eager to start eating. The hot chicken with the aroma of chili was instantly intoxicating. Ronnie chewed vigorously, admiring Stephen's cooking skills. Just then, a doe appeared in their view, perhaps drawn by the scent of the food, but the hunters paid it no attention. The meal was the priority, and they relished it, embodying the essence of their wild adventure. Stephen, a full-time hunter and gourmet, arrived in southwestern Montana today. He hired 3 alpacas to carry supplies as they planned to venture deep into the forest in search of the elusive mule deer, an area also known as cougar territory. For safety, they brought along a larger group and various supplies, departing in a van and driving until dusk before entering a forest trail to spend the night in the vehicle. After a simple dinner, everyone settled into sleep. The next morning, they struggled out of their sleeping bags, fueled up with breakfast, and began organizing their gear. Each backpack, weighing around 20 pounds, was carefully balanced on either side of the alpacas to prevent them from falling on the mountainous paths. Once everything was ready and it was light, they set out fully equipped. This was a public hunting land, indicating intense competition. However, Stephen was very familiar with the area and led the team to avoid other hunters. Walking on the snow, they enjoyed the crunching sound, although the hard snow was uncomfortable underfoot. The photographer had the toughest job, carrying a heavy backpack and continuously filming. They hiked several miles on relatively flat ground and were about to enter steep mountain paths. After checking and tightening the alpaca's packs, they started the ascent. Climbing was arduous, especially for the photographer who needed to capture shots from all angles, a job requiring robust physical strength. After much effort, they crossed the ridge and entered another flat area. The first task was to set up camp and eat. Soon after, they went in search of game. Stephen noticed deer tracks in the snow, along with human footsteps, indicating other hunters were also tracking the deer. Nearby, he found cougar tracks, complicating the situation. While examining these, Stephen spotted a young mule deer in the distance. He crouched to aim but realized it was too young, and nearby, there could be more deer. The young deer stared intensely at them, so to avoid alerting the herd, Stephen decided to circle around. After some time, he reached a vantage point hoping for a better view, but saw nothing. With the sun setting, they had no choice but to end the day's hunt. After a few hours of sleep, they woke up again and set out before sunrise, heading to a high ground to await the appearance of deer. It was eerily quiet around them. After sitting for several hours without seeing anything, Stephen felt discouraged. The wait was mentally taxing. Deciding to take the initiative, he set out to find the deer herd, and this choice proved correct when he spotted fresh tracks. A deer had passed through that morning. Following the trail, he pursued for several miles but failed to find the deer, stopping again to conduct a thorough search with his binoculars. Stephen, no longer feeling as spirited as he began, found it hard to believe how sparse the mule deer population was in such a wild area. 2 days of inadequate rest had left them all exhausted, including one of the photographers, Dall, who questioned whether it was necessary to continue waiting since they were all very hungry by then. Although Stephen wanted to continue hunting, he had to face reality and respect everyone's opinions. It seemed they would return empty-handed today, and they walked back disappointed. Hunting often tests one's luck, and after wandering in the mountains for 2 days without finding any deer, Stephen was reluctant to give up. He then shifted his focus to another local animal, the common deer. Before they set out, the llamas, tired from the past 2 days, expressed their discontent vocally. Once ready, they headed to the mountains, set up camp immediately, and then the 2 photographers joined Stephen to scout the hunting area. Several years ago, Stephen had seen a few deer in a burnt area, which he wanted to check first. Typically, post-fire areas are lush and provide excellent feeding spots for wildlife. Upon arrival, Stephen used his binoculars and spotted a doe and another deer nearby, confirming the area's abundance. He quickly identified a target, a newly matured buck with tender meat, an ideal choice. They all smiled, anticipating the taste of the venison. After studying the map, they walked along the mountain paths, trying to stay out of the deer's line of sight to approach the target quickly. Along the way, Stephen found a deer antler, an unexpected find that could be sold. He stored it in his backpack and continued. After moving through some bushes, Stephen checked again with his binoculars, but the deer had vanished. Unwilling to give up, Stephen moved closer, following a dry riverbed and slowly advancing. Midway up the slope, he saw the buck again, now within shooting range. Using his backpack as a support, he adjusted his scope's focus. Unfortunately, the buck joined a herd, complicating the shot, as Stephen did not want to harm other deer. However, an opportunity arose when the buck stood alone on a rock, providing a clearer shot. Stephen fired, and the buck bolted, soon disappearing. Rushing over, Stephen found the deer on the other side of the ridge, no longer breathing. He dragged it to an open area and admired it for a moment. As dusk approached, the group debated how to handle the deer, deciding to process it in the dark. Turning on their headlamps, Stephen began by slicing open the deer's belly, smashing the pelvis with an axe, removing the innards, and then skinning it. He also cut off the scent glands on the legs, which were particularly foul-smelling. Despite repeatedly washing his hands with snow, a persistent stench lingered. He quartered the deer, packed it all, and they carried the heavy load back to camp. Despite the difficulty of walking at night, the joy of the hunt buoyed their spirits. They returned to camp laughing and prepared dinner. Stephen tenderized some loin meat with the side of an axe, then fried it, creating a simple yet delicious meal that highlighted the venison's flavor, making for an unforgettable night. Upon returning home, they arrived just in time for Thanksgiving and prepared a feast, with the venison as the centerpiece of the meal. They enjoyed the familial joy amidst laughter and cheers. Stephen is a full-time hunter. This time, he came to the central northern part of Montana, in the Missouri Breaks, a rugged and remote mountain area inhabited by various wildlife, including mule deer. For this hunt, 2 apprentices, who are actors by profession, joined him. To better serve them, Stephen invited an experienced hunter. After some pleasantries, they organized their gear and set off in 2 small boats. The desolation of the area was striking. The barren landscape evoked a sense of loneliness and melancholy, but the sight of an eagle flying overhead brought them back to reality. In the 19th century, this area was a hideout for horse thieves. The group soon arrived and chose a spot to go ashore and set up camp with simple tents, quickly arranging their campsite. They split into pairs for the hunt, with the primary task being reconnaissance. Knowing the enemy, as well as oneself, is key to taking the initiative. They climbed to higher ground to observe from above, but Stephen didn't spot anything. Meanwhile, the other group had a different encounter. They spotted a deer moving quickly along the riverbed. Unfortunately, it was a doe. However, they didn't get discouraged, as they soon saw several more deer nearby. They carefully observed, trying to identify a mature buck. Eventually, a buck appeared, but Brian hesitated to shoot because it was too far away and still moving, making a clean shot uncertain. Considering humane practices, they decided to abandon the hunt. As dusk fell, they had no choice but to return to camp. Meanwhile, Joe and Stephen hadn't seen any deer all afternoon, making it a disappointing start to their hunting trip. At dawn the next day, the group set out once more. Today, Stephen was in luck, as he soon spotted 3 deer, 2 of which were mature bucks. However, the wind direction was not favorable, and moving hastily could alert the deer, so they moved slowly, waiting for the wind to change. Tracking deer in the vast wilderness is not an easy task, and unsurprisingly, they lost sight of their targets. Meanwhile, Brian's group, after some searching, found a doe with 2 fawns. Where there's a doe, bucks are often not far behind, so they crept forward to get a closer look. Their judgment was spot on as they spotted a buck in the bushes ahead. Just as Brian was about to make a move, the deer quickly started moving and chose to cross the river, leaving the hunters empty-handed. The deer's decision to enter the water in such cold weather indicated they sensed danger, likely smelling human presence. This outcome was incredibly frustrating. At the same time, Stephen and Joe were still searching for deer. Now, in the muddy ground, they found very fresh hoof prints, which greatly encouraged them. Soon, they spotted 2 deer, with the ridge conveniently blocking their view, which was perfect for approaching their targets. The 2 climbed up the ridge and peeked over the top, spotting the buck below. Stephen used his backpack as a support, but the buck, sensing danger, started to run and call out. adopting a bouncing running style to evade the hunter's aim. Clearly, this was an experienced deer. Their first encounter ended in Stephen's complete defeat. However, he was not ready to give up. After walking over 100 yards along the ridge, they encountered the buck again. Stephen mimicked the deer's call, and as the buck turned in confusion, Joe decisively fired his gun. With the sound of the gunshot, the buck fell. Stephen generously praised Joe, who was still in shock, hardly believing he had actually succeeded in hunting. The experience was both tense and thrilling. They approached to examine their prey, a handsome mule deer with a robust and sturdy body that fascinated the hunters. Such a feeling can only be truly understood by those who experience it firsthand. Joe sincerely thanked Stephen for enriching his life. Stephen handed him a knife, explaining that personally butchering the prey is the highest honor for a hunter. Joe hoped the spirit of the mule deer would return to nature. This hunt would remain unforgettable for him for the rest of his life. This was a robust mule deer, just killed by the hunter apprentice, Joe. Calming his excitement, Joe butchered the deer and then returned to camp. Hearing the news, the other two campers sincerely congratulated him, making Brian feel envious. Although it was late, they hadn't yet had dinner. Stephen took out the fresh liver, sliced it thinly, and heated oil in a pan. He prepared some onions, frying them first until aromatic, and then added the liver slices. After a brief wait, he sprinkled some salt on top, and a simple yet delicious dish was ready. As a reward, Joe got to taste the first bite. The tender liver, combined with the savory onions, was utterly satisfying. Everyone thoroughly enjoyed the meal, and they spent a pleasant evening amid laughter and joy. The next morning, after washing up, they set out again. Joe had completed his task, but Brian hadn't, so he felt a lot of pressure today. He and the experienced hunter moved and searched for targets together. Their perseverance paid off when they vaguely spotted a target behind a ridge. They slowly approached and observed from a higher vantage point, but initially saw nothing. However, the experienced hunter's intuition told him that the deer was hiding somewhere below. Moving quietly, they indeed spotted doe. As Brian adjusted his position, the doe seemed to sense danger and started to bounce away before Brian could shoot. The old hunter mimicked a deer call, which made the doe pause and look around in confusion. Seizing the opportunity, Brian fired, hitting the doe's lungs and causing her to tumble several times. The loud noise scared the other mule deer into fleeing. The two approached the fallen deer, which was a mature doe. Brian stroked its head, feeling sentimental, and wished its spirit a return to nature. He then began to skin the deer, guided by the old hunter. Brian successfully removed the innards and packed the edible parts. Together, they dragged the deer back, marking a tremendous experience for Brian. Watching their returning figures, the others felt happy for them and prepared to meet up, creating a heartwarming scene. Since both apprentices had completed their hunting tasks, they were ready to fully celebrate with a venison feast. But first, they had to retrieve the deer Joe had hunted, which was still hanging from a tree overnight, untouched by wild animals. They chose to butcher the deer right there, starting a fire at the site. Brian cut off a piece of meat and tried eating it raw, a primitive method, but the others preferred their meat cooked. While waiting for the appetizers, Joe hung various parts of the deer. Once the meat was cooked, they began tasting it, finding the flavor to be excellent. They continued to butcher and roast the meat, efficiently combining their tasks with satisfying their appetites. The deer was quickly processed. It is said that deer eyes taste like jelly. Stephen scooped them out, and Brian, trying one, described it as a strange sensation. After packing all the venison, they began their journey back. Meanwhile, the old hunter had also brought back the doe and skinned it expertly with swift movements of his knife, quickly pulling off the hide. The main dish for the day was a special recipe, cooking the deer head, a method learned from the mountain people of the northern Rocky Mountains, which Stephen had read about in books. By the time the trio returned to the campsite, the old hunter had everything ready. Stephen took over, digging a hole in the charcoal, moistening some cotton cloth, wrapping the deer head in aluminum foil first, then in the cloth. The neck was treated similarly. Afterward, they patiently waited. They also prepared sweet potatoes, a heart, and some pumpkins, wrapping the vegetables in foil, while preparing the heart by mixing chopped garlic and apples. then wrapping it as well before placing everything on the charcoal. They added more wood to cook everything more quickly. Their feast wasn't complete without the final dish: roasted loin. They cut the meat into pieces, flattened them with stones, then gathered the charcoal and placed a grill over it. After seasoning the loin, they grilled it until cooked. Stephen then unwrapped the foil to check on the deer head, releasing a delicious aroma. He cut a piece of tender meat for everyone to taste. The hot meat melted in their mouths, delicious beyond words, and the grilled loin was lean yet chewy, offering a lingering taste. As they enjoyed their meal, they couldn't believe how tasty the deer meat was. Stephen, true to his gourmet status, had indeed treated them to a feast where each dish had its unique flavor. Unsure of which dish to eat first, they indulged themselves heartily. This hunting trip left them all incredibly satisfied.